Hello. In the Crown of Aragon, 639 years ago, it was May 15th, 1387. My name is Jonathan Seyfried. I'm a PhD candidate in history at the University of New Mexico, and this is the Historian's Notebook, a podcast about how history gets made. Season 1 is titled Multcara Companiona. We're looking at a document from each day of the first year of the reign of King Joan I of Aragon and Queen Violant de Bar. Let's begin today's document. Well, I hope you're ready for things to take a dramatic turn, because this is one of the most exciting documents that we'll be looking at in the entire first season. What happens in today's document is that Violant really lets loose with the suspicions of sorcery against Joan as one of the causes, if not the principal cause, of his illness. As you look at the document for today, it begins at the bottom of folio 96V of Register 2056, and it looks like kind of a normal document, but then you look on the other page, the next folio 97R, and you can see that this has gotten very unusual in terms of the layout. So right when you're looking at it, you can tell, ooh, something weird is going on, because after the conclusion of the letter, there is like hardly any space on the page, and the scribe, which is, I'm pretty sure, Bartolomeo Sirvent. I mean, I know it's Bartolomeo Sirvent for the first chunk of this, but then there's these two addendums, and they are just squished onto the page. Bartolomeo Sirvent, for the last chunk, had to write in like squished handwriting in order to fit it in. I don't have any idea why it was necessary for this to all be on the same page, but evidently Bartolomeo Sirvent judged it to be so. I think part of the explanation has to do with the notation that comes before the second chunk on folio 97R, where it's a very unusual Latin phrase in these registers. It starts with cedulae, and then sub inserte fuerent. Then I think we have something like intercluye or intercluse in letra presenta. So we have a note indicating that these two subsequent chunks were inserted in with the previous letter. And so I think what Bartolomeo Sirvent was worried about was that if he went to the next folio, it might be somehow misinterpreted as sent under a separate letter. So he felt a need to make sure that the content that was included, maybe after the completion of the previous letter, but it was still included. It's so different and odd in terms of the way that it's laid out on the page that I just... and the content is very outlandish and different also. All right, let's take it from the beginning. Well, we have an addressee that is also squished in. It's interesting. The layout here makes me think that some of these notations were added at a later time and that they left these things open as a general practice and they were filled in later, because in this situation, if you are putting in the addressee in a different... How are you doing it? Yeah, it's very interesting to note that the addressee is in the kind of usual parentheses, but it's just smaller. It's this smaller size. And you can see clearly the word ambassadoribus, the ambassadors. So Violant is once again writing to the ambassadors in Avignon. And what we have seen in the last month is that they get the full story. The ambassadors in Avignon get the unvarnished truth, while her parents and everybody else gets the he's doing fine version. He's convalescing. But it's the ambassadors in Avignon who I think Violant feels for some reason they need to hear the details. So, what are those details? Interestingly, she's repeating things that she's already written to them. So here we are on May 15th, and now let's look at the beginning of this letter on folio 96V. She starts out by saying that she's received their letters, and then after that, she says at the end of line 3, e per tal que sapiats planerament tota la accidencia del fet del dit signore. So she is going to write to them in order for them to know fully about the accidentia, which I think we'd better start translating as something a little bit stronger than misfortune. I mean, maybe we can actually interpret that as something like an attack, a health attack, an illness that struck. Not really just the lighter translation of that as misfortune, something a little bit more intense. So I think she knows that they know already the recap, but she is going to do it anyway. So on line 7, line 6, she starts at the beginning of this recent saga. She says, Hage 15 dies vanc febre. All right, so basically saying it was 15 days ago that the fever came for the said lord. So that's not entirely accurate, because it's a little bit more than 15 days. In the letter that she sent on April 30th, she said that it was in the hour of Vespers on the Sunday, which was April 28th. So she's still sticking here, though, with the idea that it's the Sunday. So she's, not being exact when she says 15 days. So in line 7, she starts the next sentence, e en lo demenge en torn hora de vespers. Okay. So again, we're locating this in time on a Sunday at the hour of vespers at sunset. So that part matches. So we're still talking about the same illness, the same attack that struck Joan. And then she talks about the doctors. So she says, a ordinatio de les metges volien li donar un... And then I think we've got restiri. Not sure. Then we have another piece of information at the end of line 9. All right. Well, she says, I'll just read the next sentence entirely. E abans que li fos dat, lo dit signor hage un fort accident des mortiment. All right, so here the time is vague, but it's something like a little while after that. The said lord had another axis, so strong attack, and this one, des mortimont. I mean, I think we can say deadly, right? And so the next phrase is per lo qual venc a fort punt. So it got him to this point. So basically, it's saying like he almost died. All right. Then we have the doctors giving him some medicine, all they could. And after that, he was able to eat. And then we get to, there's 2 words for eating, the viands con en abergages, en medicines. That last phrase is at the top of folio 97R. All right, so it seems like he was responding to the medicine, but then at the top of folio 97R in line 1, we see that there's 4 accidents, so 4 attacks of illness, and then I think what we're looking at is semblance and tant. So there were more, and I think the implication here is that over the subsequent days, there were more health attacks that struck him. So I think that this has really been ongoing. And indeed, we're going to see that later on, about 10 days from now, Violant is going to write about Joan's extended weakness. She says about 10 or 12 days from now that he sometimes can't sleep for days. So yeah, that it's got to be this intense illness is still with him. So there's a couple documents coming up where it seems like Joan is involved, and we're just going to have to keep an eye on this because I'm not sure that he's doing much based on what we've seen from Violant. Now, she does go on to say that he has a good vigor and that he's doing better, and we have, the word convalescenza. Oh gosh, I always get messed up. Convalescencia happening. So, the end of the letter is he made it through. And thanks be to the power of God, he made it through, and we're gonna be okay. That's how the letter appears to end. And then there's the dating clause, and it all seems kind of normal. But then, after the dating clause, we get the 2 additional chunks that get added in with that Latin phrase that they've been included with the present letter. All right, this is where it gets wild. Okay. We see in the first chunk that was added in, the sentence, I'm just going to read it out because it's just really striking. Quant este esser lo signore maleficiat per constructions e sortilegis de imagens es ver que un nigromantit. All right, so necromancy was that last word. So, all in that one phrase, we have the malefici, right? Maleficiat turned into a verb. So he was done evil, like evil was done to him. Per, and then constructions, constructions. That's basically like, constructions. How would you? Well, the next word, sortileges, is, I think, sorceries. So maybe something like spells, recipe, evil sorcery recipes. You construct them, right? And then we have imagines. So that's something that brings up this magic category. So basically, imaginations, right? All right. So we've got this whole set of words that are basically everything that you can say about evil curses. And then the rest of this chunk is basically saying to the ambassadors, look, I need you to find something that will cure him. I need you to go out there and in whatever, like in Ultra Manera, like whatever you got to do, ask around all of the people in the Avignon Papacy who know about this stuff, who know about how to counteract evil curses, and help me to find some way to counteract what has been done. All right, it's important to understand that Violant writes that they have somebody in prison who has confessed to this. And that part is in the next chunk. So now we're moving on to the third chunk on folio 97R, which is written in much smaller sized script because Bartolomeo Sirvent, poor Bartolomeo Sirvent, was running out of space. And in the end of the first line, we have something like Segons a par per lo pres. So imprisoned, and then the next line, qui sen fa en Saragosi de Mallorques. So it's this guy, we've seen his name before, one of Sibylla's advisors, a person named Saragosi de Mallorques. He's in prison, and he has confessed, according to this little chunk here. He has confessed that there have been curses. It might not be that he was willing to say that he himself did the curses, but basically he has confirmed that there have been evil curses and sorcery and the maleficis and the constructions and the sortileges and the nigromantit and all that. It's all been done. Nigromancit, I think it's pronounced. Anyway, so it's all been done to Joan, and it's not just Violant's imagination. She's not making it up. She's got someone in prison who has confessed to doing it, and so we know that this is the situation, and so ambassadors in Avignon, you need to find somebody who can counteract the curses. You've got to find some kind of, I don't know if she would have thought like exorcist, but like somebody with specialized knowledge of the powers of, the Christian forces to, in the realm of the spiritual, fight back against what's been done to Joan. Let's take a step back for a second. I'm sure that Violant is smart enough to know that if somebody is tortured, They're going to confess to stuff that they didn't do, but at the same time, I think she is worn down emotionally from, I mean, it seems like Joanna's just been in this really awful sickness for, like, this intensity has been going on for like 2 weeks now. And so I think she is at this point ready to overlook any of the questionable aspects of the confession that has been made by Saragossa de Mallorquez, and she's basically decided this is a factor. And we've seen her writing to the monasteries earlier during the days right after the severe illness struck on April 28th, and writing to the monasteries saying, pray for Joan, activate the intercessionary forces to help him do better. But this is a whole other level. Like, it's one thing to live in a world where or you have a certainty that there are spiritual forces that play a role in daily life. It's another thing to have access to an actual person who you believe has done the curses. And so now you're in this more practical operating theater where basically you have to decide what you're going to do with this person and how you're going to figure out a way. Because if a human did the curse and you've got that human, then you can get another human to undo it. So you're now in this situation where if you have the people, you can do some things, and it's way different than just imagining that there's a battle going on in the spiritual realm, right? So Violant springs into action, trying to get people and tools to counteract the sorcery that she now feels like she has evidence has been done to Joan. About 10 days from today, we have a letter from Violant in which she is trying to obtain a particular manuscript, a book of curses, that she thinks will also contain the antidote curses in order to help Joan. So on May 25th, we'll look at that document. But it just goes to show how she is searching at this point. She's searching for people and resources in order to do something to help her molt car signor, right? Molt car marit. So today's document really takes us into a whole new direction. And my suspicion is that she writes it on May 15th because that's when the confession from Saragossa de Mallorquez was obtained and maybe presented to her. That's my guess about why it's May 15th that she's writing this to the ambassadors in Avignon. And I would just really like to know, like, what did the ambassadors in Avignon do? Did they go asking around to, like, the specialists in sorcery that were in the Avignon Papacy? I mean, how many were there? What was that scene like? Ooh, that must have been really interesting. Or maybe they dismissed it saying, like, no one gets into that around here, and we're just going to have to, tell the queen that we're doing our best, but there's not really much that we can do. So the world of magic and sorcery and counter curses, all of that is something I don't know a whole lot about, but Dr. Michael A. Ryan, who works at the University of New Mexico and who I get to talk to quite a lot. He knows a ton about it. So I get to talk with him about this and ask him a little bit more what he thinks. So I've got some personal resources to contact, but there's quite a lot of work being done in the history of medieval magic. So there's a lot of scholars who have explored this and know quite a lot about what Violant might have had in mind when she was convinced that there had been evil sorcery done against Joan, and also that Sibylla had a hand in it. Let's not forget that part. Thanks for listening to this episode of The Historian's Notebook, Season 1, Molt Cara Compagnona. If you are leaving with more questions than you arrived with, I've done my job. Remember, the motto of The Historian's Notebook is dissatisfaction guaranteed. But if you're feeling a bit dissatisfied about how you didn't get a whole lot of detail regarding medieval magic, I'll put some sources, citations in the bibliography for today's episode on its webpage. So visit the website to see an image of today's document and additional show notes, and listen again tomorrow to hear about the next day in the first year of the reign of King Joan I of Aragon and Queen Violant de Bar. In the meantime, take care.